Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a great day. Today is going to be a how to blend colored pencils video. I've been working with colored pencils a lot on my sketchbook lately, and I thought it would be a nice way to kind of round up everything before Inktober starts. Kind of a bit of away from my usual ink and watercolor type thing, because there's going to be a lot of those in the next month. So let's get started. There are a couple of things that I want to talk about, but the first ones I want to show you, because I'm doing a small demo here, is layers and pressure. Now, aside from all of the other things that you need to keep into account when working with colored pencils, I think that layers and pressure are kind of the main things that you need to look out for. And that is because the amount of layers and the amount of pressure you apply is going to control how everything looks. So when you have your one color pencil and you're not blending it with others, but you want to blend that out to make it smoother and to have this kind of gradient effect from light to dark, what you want to do is to start with a light layer. I had an art teacher in high school, and I have found also through practicing a lot with colored pencils that it is better to do several layers one on top of another instead of doing one really thick and hard layer, because the end result is going to be a lot smoother that way. So how this works is, as you stroke, you want to lift the amount of pressure that you are applying to the pencil so that the amount of pigment you are depositing on the paper isn't as much. It also works in the way that the more layers you have, the less pressure you need to apply. A good way to practice this is to use one of those basic shading exercises. You take a circle and you define a light source, and where the light source hits it, the amount of color is going to be a lot lighter, and on the opposite side of that, the color or the shading is going to be a lot darker. And it's a good way to practice doing that gradient effect, because in the end, when you're trying to blend several colors together, that is how you do it. You layer them one on top of another in different levels of pressure so that they fade into one another. So in this quick demo that I'm doing here, you can see that I am using one color pencil and doing several layers until I get kind of a buildup of color on one side, and then it slowly fades into the light part of the sphere, I guess you could call it. And then after that is done, I come in with a darker pencil to kind of make the shadows a little darker, but it's the same thing. I take another color and then I'll apply one layer with more pressure compared to the other two layers of the other color. Now, of course, that this slow fading kind of even layer effect, I guess you could call it, is not the only thing you can do. A really popular one that I use a lot when drawing hair is this kind of a lot of single strokes that fade at the end. So you take your pencil and you create strokes in one direction, with starting with a lot of pressure, and then you, when ending the stroke, you kind of lift your hand to create a faded end to the stroke, I guess you could call it. And what this does, it helps a lot to create directionality. So if I were to smoothly create this blend effect on the hair without creating kind of directionality, it would look kind of odd, kind of you just applied a gradient effect on Photoshop on this thing. It creates no volume or anything. So instead, by creating lots of little strokes in one direction, you create this kind of movement. And by having the ends of those strokes a little bit faded, when you put the other layer of any other color shade on top, they're going to fade into one another. It all depends on what you're going for, what effect you're going for. But it's important to remember that you don't have to stick to one layer of each color. You can go back with as many layers as you want, or as many layers as the paper can allow you. That is another thing to keep in mind, what kind of paper you are using. So in this case, I am using a smooth paper called opalina, and I use this all the time when I'm working with my markers. And what I usually do when working with colored pencils is use a layer of marker underneath so that I have kind of an even base to work off of. Ideally, you would use a rougher paper, a paper that has more teeth to it, rather than a smoother paper, because that texture allows you to deposit a little bit more pigment to the paper, and it's going to give you a chance to put down a lot more layers than a smooth paper will. What also defines that is what kind of pencil you are using. I am using Prismacolor Premier pencils. They're a bit pricey, but I think the quality is pretty good. I don't know if they're the best out there. I have my eyes on the Polychromos by Faber-Castell, which is kind of their high-end color pencil line. And I have worked with Faber-Castell before, but not the Polychromos, but their usual student line, which I think is oil-based. So the pencils are a bit harder. And that makes them a little bit harder to blend because it doesn't go down as smooth. Now, and that happens with every pencil. The softer the lead is, the easier it's going to be to blend. I think that the best way to explain this is with graphite. Graphite, you have different values of softness in the lead, and you have different darknesses. I'm not going to go into graphite too much, but let's say that you have a pencil, and the pencil is a 6B, and you have an H. Obviously, the 6B is going to be a lot easier to blend because the lead is so much more soft than the H that has a very hard lead. And the mistake that a lot of people do is they use a pencil that has a hard lead and then they apply so much pressure to the paper ends up being kind of embossed and you can actually see the strokes really hard. And it's like when little kids are learning how to write and they just press down really, really hard on the pencil because their motor skills are not developed yet. And you see that you can lift up the paper and see the embossing in the back of what they wrote. It's easier to blend if you don't do that. Having a light hand in everything when it comes to art helps a lot because you can build up, but you can't take away the pigment. So if you go in too hard and you're like, ooh, that's too dark, well, the only solution would be to apply a lighter color pencil on top. But if you've saturated the paper with the amount of pressure that you used, it's not going to work very well. Those are the basics to it. After you've gained enough muscle memory in your hands to be able to control the amount of pressure that you use in a single stroke or when you're drawing, blending is it's not super easy, but you can wing it. It's all about practicing so that your hand gets the feel of it. And once you get the feel of it, it's almost automatic. You don't have to think about it because your hand has already learned how to do it. So it's more about building those connections and the muscle memory rather than to, be very deliberate about it, I guess is the way you could say that. And here, I am drawing a character. I did this line art digitally and I have had it for a while. I thought it would be a good example on how to blend because it has so many little details. So I ended up screwing up her face in the end. I love the way her eyes look in the line art, but in the end it didn't work that well because I have a problem with fine details of lining when it comes to colored pencils. When it's not directly sketching with colored pencils, but recreating a line art on top. And that is tip number 354 is don't start by doing the easy things in your painting. Start by doing the hard things or in your piece, because if you screw it up, guess what? You can start over and you just messed up a little bit, but I did the face at the end and I couldn't start over, so, keep that in mind. As for colored pencils, I am using the Prismacolor color pencils, And saying that is very weird because my native language is Spanish, and in Spanish you don't say colored pencils, you just say colors. So if you say, "Hey, can I borrow your colors?" they know what you mean. Like, they'll give you their pencil case. But in English you have to say colored pencils, otherwise people will be like, "What do you mean give you my colors?" It's just a fun fact for you. Language is weird. I do want the polychromos, but I have heard a lot of good things from this brand called Carandash, I think is how you pronounce it. Maybe I'm butchering it, I don't know. And I also want to try them out, but I can't justify buying any more color pencils until I am at least halfway done with my tin, because I have the 132 Prismacolor pencil tin. I wish I've gotten the less than that, because that means that I could have gotten more color pencils to try out in different brands, but alas, I did not. I got greedy and got the big stuff. So another thing is that you need to experiment with different kinds of color pencils in order to get the feel of them, because I mean, I say this, and I've tried I've tried the Faber-Castell ones, the ones that are really hard, and I've learned how to blend with them. And after using these, I've learned how to blend with them after practicing that, how to blend a color pencil is going to depend a lot on what kind of pencil you are using. And I think that's about it. I think that covers mostly everything that I wanted to say. If there is anything else that I forgot, I will put it in the description or in a blog post accompanying this, although I don't think so. Just a reminder that Inktober is coming, and I will be uploading 3 videos a week for Inktober. If you don't know what Inktober is a challenge on social media during the month of October where you create pieces using only ink. I think that the general, accepted rule is that it's supposed to be black ink or India ink. I've seen a lot of people use, only that. I am going to try to use only India ink as well, because I use ink in almost all of my pieces every day. So I think it would be a fun challenge to just step away from the color, which is my favorite part of everything, and to create something only in black and white. So I will see you next week with my September favorites, Inktober style. You can subscribe here if you'd like to see more videos like this, or you can follow me on Instagram for almost daily doodly things. I hope this was helpful to some people at least, and I will see you next time.